The wine glasses chimed as my son raised his toast. To family who matter. I smiled, lifting my plastic plate while everyone else dined off porcelain. When I began to speak, he waved a hand without looking. Mom, please don't. Just stay quiet tonight. Laughter fluttered down the table like perfume. I swallowed my words, folding my napkin. That's when my lawyer stood from the corner, stepped forward, and laid a thick envelope by his glass. You told me to stay quiet. I only did what you asked. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. I wasn't always the woman who sat at the end of the table, holding a plastic plate like it was a punishment. Once, I was everything to my son. When his father died in a car crash just outside Harrisburg, I was 39 and suddenly widowed with a 4-year-old boy who still asked me to tie his shoes. The night the officer gave me the news, I remember holding my son so tightly I thought I might crush him. He didn't understand why I cried into his hair or why I whispered again and again, "It's okay, baby. I've got you now. I've got you forever." Forever turned out to be longer and harder than I thought. I worked 2 jobs, nursing home caregiver by day, motel laundry by night. I learned how to unclog pipes, patch up leaky ceilings, and fix broken shoes because every dollar mattered. I remember packing his lunch in old bread bags because foil cost too much. Still, he always smiled when he pulled out the peanut butter sandwiches I made into stars. He was a good boy, smart, sweet, told me I was the strongest lady in the world. When I carried groceries in the rain with a busted umbrella, I never remarried. Not because there weren't chances, but because I didn't want anything taking time or attention from him. My husband's old truck stayed parked in the driveway like a ghost I couldn't let go of. Everything I did was for my son's future. When he got into a top college, I cashed in the small life insurance policy. When he launched his first tech idea, some app for small businesses, I took out a second mortgage on the home his father built with his own hands. He promised he'd pay me back. I didn't care. I believed in him. For a while, it felt like it was all worth it. His business took off, articles were written, his name was on panels. Soon he had investors, a company, a logo on frosted glass. He moved into a big house in the suburbs, stone columns, winding driveway, the kind with a separate gate for deliveries. He married a beautiful woman who always looked like she was walking, off a magazine cover. They had 2 perfect kids, and I crocheted their baby blankets myself. He told me once at Christmas, "You made all this possible, Mom." And I believed him. But something shifted over time. It started small. He'd correct the way I said certain words at dinner, or gently steer conversations away when I talked about the past. "Mom, no one needs to hear about you working 2 jobs. That was a different time." I didn't mind. I wanted to be helpful, not embarrassing. When they hosted parties, I'd be asked to come late. "We just want things to be calm first, you understand?" And when I brought homemade pies, they'd be left in the kitchen while bakery desserts were served on glass tiers. The worst was when he started calling me by my first name in front of his friends. "Elaine, can you grab the gift bags?" "Elaine, just wait in the sunroom, please." As if Mom had become inconvenient. Still, I smiled. Still, I came. I told myself I was lucky. He was busy, successful, stressed. He didn't mean it. Then came the birthday that everyone forgot. No call, no text, no card. I spent the day watching old VHS tapes of his childhood, eating a slice of cake I baked for myself. When I called the next day, he said, "Oh, we've just been swamped. You know how it is." The next month, I asked if he could pick me up from the train station for his daughter's recital. He said, "Could you take the bus instead, Mom? It's just parking near the theater is a nightmare." I told myself to stop expecting things, that mothers give without needing applause. But something inside me, a quiet, trembling part I'd long buried, started asking, what happens when all the giving turns into erasure? I didn't want money. I didn't want praise. I just wanted to be treated like someone who mattered, someone seen, and yet every gesture, every call, every smile from me seemed to shrink in his eyes. He had outgrown me, or maybe he wanted to. I gave him everything I had, my time, my trust, my name. But slowly, piece by piece, he returned none of it. And what he did return wasn't mine anymore. The first time I truly noticed it, the feeling of being unwanted, I was standing in my son's grand foyer, holding a warm casserole dish wrapped in a towel. His wife opened the door, surprised. "Oh, I thought this was being delivered?" Delivered. She ushered me in with a polite smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. The entryway smelled like white lilies and some expensive candle that made me sneeze. I followed her in, dish in hand, only to be gently redirected toward the back patio where the caterers were setting up. "Just leave it with them, Elaine. They've got everything sorted." I stood there, dish still in hand, watching a teenage server place hors d'oeuvres on silver trays, while mine, corn casserole with crispy onion topping, my son's favorite, was quietly pushed to the side. That night, I ate alone on the patio. In public, he still called me Mom, posted once on Facebook. Couldn't have done it without her. But privately, he made it clear I was to be handled. Smoothed over. When he introduced me to his new financial advisor, Charles, it was framed as a favor. Charles is helping. All of us consolidate things. Just easier for everyone. Charles wore sleek suits and called me Ms. Elaine, like I was a distant aunt. He asked me to sign a few simple restructuring papers. I trusted him because my son had hired him. What I didn't know was that those papers included temporary rights over my property, an account merge, and authorization for fund transfers for investment purposes. Still, I chalked it up to modern business. I didn't understand half the lingo, but I told myself it was probably helping him. That's what mothers do. We justify what we don't understand if it helps our children sleep better. It wasn't until a friend of mine from church, a retired bookkeeper, asked me to show her one of the documents that I paused. She raised her eyebrows. "You signed this?" "Yes, why?" She didn't answer right away. She just quietly said, "Maybe have someone else look at it too." But I never did. Not then. Because around that time, I received a call from my son inviting me to a family dinner. "Just us," he said. "The whole family. No clients, no distractions. You'll love it." There was warmth in his voice I hadn't heard in a long time. He said they'd cook something special and that he wanted the grandkids to spend time with me. I told him I'd bring dessert, his favorite, chocolate pudding pie with extra whipped cream. I even went shopping for a new scarf, navy blue with tiny embroidered doves. I thought it looked graceful, respectful. For a moment, I let myself believe we were turning a corner. The day of the dinner, I arrived early, like always. I rang the bell and waited almost 5 minutes. When the door finally opened, it wasn't my son, it was the nanny. She led me through the side entrance, explaining that they were still getting ready. I waited in the sunroom alone for nearly half an hour. I could hear laughter from the kitchen, glasses clinking, music playing. Not once did anyone come to say hello. When they finally called me to dinner, everyone was already seated. There wasn't a spot at the main table. They had set up a smaller one off to the side. "Just for comfort," the wife said. I nodded, sat, and tried not to notice the paper napkin folded beside my plastic plate. Then came the toast. My son stood, smiling, glass raised high. I want to thank everyone who's helped build this next chapter, especially my amazing in-laws. Your generosity made the new trust possible. Applause followed. A few people glanced at me, curious, confused maybe. I started to speak, just to say how proud I was of him, but he waved his hand casually like swatting a fly. "Mom, please, not now. Just stay quiet tonight, okay? Just stay quiet." The words echoed in my chest, Not loud, but sharp. I nodded, lowered my fork, pressed the napkin to my lap. In that moment, I realized I was no longer his mother in this house. I was a shadow, a necessary afterthought, a name on a mailing list. After dessert, I stood up and thanked everyone. I smiled as I left, pie untouched in its dish, scarf still neatly folded around my neck. I didn't cry until I got home. He told me to be proud of what we built, but somehow, in his version of the story, I was nothing more than the foundation. Silent, hidden, forgotten beneath the shine. The next morning, I sat at my kitchen table in silence, staring at the clean dish where the pie had rested. Not a single slice was eaten. I hadn't even been offered coffee. I picked at the crust with a fork, wondering if I had imagined it all, that cold glance, the dismissive hand gesture, the plastic plate. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I was old-fashioned, as his wife once hinted, but deep down, I knew better. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a pattern. A slow erasure dressed up as modern boundaries and polite disinterest. A week later, I received an email from Charles, the financial advisor. Per your authorization, we've finalized the asset reallocation under your son's name for streamlined management. There were no specifics, just a long PDF I couldn't understand. I called my son. He didn't answer. Instead, I got a short text. It's all fine, Mom. Charles knows what he's doing. Trust the process. But I didn't feel fine. I felt like I was vanishing. The next time I saw my son was at his son's piano recital. I wore a pale pink cardigan and pearl earrings, ones his father had given me for our 10th anniversary. I brought flowers for my grandson, sat in the second row, smiling even when other grandparents brushed past me like I didn't belong. When the recital ended, I walked up to hug him. Before I could, his wife stepped in front of me. "Can you take these?" she said, handing me the used programs and half-empty juice boxes. "We've got a dinner to get to." She turned back toward the stage without waiting for a reply. I held, the trash in one hand, the flowers in the other, and watched as they left. My grandson looked back once. Then he was gone. Later that night, I opened the bottom drawer of my dresser and pulled out the folder I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the original property deeds, one for my house, one for the land my husband and I had purchased decades ago. That land was now under my son's mansion, transferred in name for tax efficiency. He had never paid for it, never offered to. I remembered the day I signed it over. He brought Chinese takeout, told me how the government would take less if the land was under his name temporarily. I had trusted him. Like always, I sat with the documents for a long time. I thought about the casserole dish, the untouched pie, the plastic plate, the silencing hand. I thought about how I used to rock him to sleep, humming lullabies into the curve of his ear, and how he used to call me Mama, with so much joy it filled every hallway in that old house. Now he didn't even say my name unless he wanted me quiet. I decided to do something I hadn't done in years. I went to the bank. I asked for a printout of my remaining accounts. The clerk hesitated, looking nervous. "Some of these are under a shared management profile now," she said. I stared at her. "Shared with who?" She tapped her keyboard. "Mr. Evan Callahan. Your son." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my chair, blanket over my knees, listening to the creak of the old ceiling fan and the ticking of the clock my husband had fixed 1,000 times before he passed. I thought about all the times I stayed quiet, all the times I told myself it wasn't worth the fight, but suddenly, silence didn't feel like peace anymore. It felt like surrender. 2 days later, I called an old number, one I hadn't dialed in 15 years. "Law offices of Marcus E. Bellamy," the receptionist answered. "Is Marcus still practicing?" I asked. A pause. "Yes, may I ask who's calling?" "Tell him it's Elaine." When Marcus got on the line, he didn't ask many questions, just said, "Come in, bring everything you've got." I packed the deeds, the email from Charles, and my marriage certificate, just in case. I even brought a copy of my husband's will. He would have wanted that. When I walked into Marcus's office, I half expected him not to recognize me. But he stood, shook my hand gently, and said, "I was wondering how long it would take you to call." We spent 3 hours going through everything. He looked over every paper, every transfer, every signature. By the end, he sat back and sighed. "I don't want to alarm you," he said, "but what your son's done isn't just morally wrong, it's legally questionable. Especially the shared account and the land deed." I stared at my hands. They looked like my mother's now, veined and wrinkled, but steady. "What do I do?" I asked. He looked at me carefully. "We build our case, quietly, thoughtfully, and, when the moment is right, you let me do the talking." They thought my silence was weakness. What they didn't realize is that I was listening, and now I wasn't alone. I don't remember falling asleep that night. I just know I woke up to the sound of rain against the windows and the weight of something heavy on my chest. Not physical, but deep, like grief with no name. I pulled out the old shoebox from my closet, the one I hadn't opened in over a decade. Inside were photographs, brittle at the corners, and a few cassette tapes my husband had recorded when our son was little. One in particular, dated July 1990, was labeled Evan's Backyard Interview. I slid it into the dusty tape player. The static was soft at first. Then came a voice, high-pitched, happy. "I'm going to build the biggest house in the world, and Mommy can live in it forever and ever." My husband chuckled in the background. "That's sweet, buddy. I'll get her a room full of stars and a robot that brings her tea." My breath hitched. I paused the tape. Sat with the silence. Where did that boy go? The rain continued all morning. I sat by the window with a blanket over my legs and tea that had gone cold. And then, as if the universe wanted me to remember more, I found the old voicemail. It was from 3 months earlier. I had saved it without realizing its weight at the time. "Hey, Mom, just wanted to give you a heads up. Charles is going to help move some of your accounts into one big system. It's easier, tax-wise. Just sign whatever he sends. It's all standard. Don't stress, okay? No love you, no goodbye, just instructions. Just control." I played it again, and then I deleted it. The next day, I took a walk through my old neighborhood, past the house we used to live in, the one my husband built with calloused hands and second-hand bricks. It had been painted, beige now, the garden overgrown, the porch railings sagging, but I could still see it, the way it used to be. I remembered Evan's first bike ride in that cul-de-sac, wobbling toward me with scraped knees and fearless laughter. I remembered our little Christmases with popcorn garlands and dollar store ornaments. I remembered the way he used to ask, "Did I do good, Mama?" After every school play. I remembered the night of my husband's funeral. Evan had been too young to understand. He kept asking when Daddy was coming home. I held him in my lap and told him a story about the stars, that his father was up there now, watching over us, and that we had to make him proud. "Can I be the man now?" Evan had asked. I cried. Not because he said it, but because I let him. I gave him that role, too early, too completely. I let him become the center of the universe, mine and his. And now? He had turned that role into something sharp, something cold. I sat in my living room and flipped through the notebook Marcus had given me. Inside were summaries of my accounts, the legal path to reclaiming my property rights, and notes about next steps. At the bottom of one page, he'd written in all caps, "Silence is not compliance." I stared at that line for a long time. How? Many times had I confused silence with grace, with patience, with love. I had let him chip away at my dignity one gesture at a time. One forgotten birthday, one plastic plate, one, "Mom, please don't." Not anymore. That night, I lit a single candle and placed it beside my husband's photograph. He was smiling in the picture, sleeves rolled up, sawdust on his shoulders. I whispered, "I should have spoken sooner." And then I whispered something else, but I will now, I promise. The next day, Marcus and I met at the notary's office. We reactivated my retirement account. We filed a preliminary injunction on the land deed. We flagged the account withdrawals as unauthorized. He asked me, "Do you want to go public?" I shook my head. "Not yet." "Then what's the plan?" he asked. I smiled for the first time in weeks. "I'm going to dinner." Have you ever been left out like that? By someone you raised? Someone you would have given your last breath for? I didn't break down. I woke up. And once I did, there was no going back. Not for my son. Not for my silence. Not for the woman I used to be. I didn't tell anyone I was coming to the next dinner. I waited until the day of and sent a brief text to my son's assistant, the only one who ever answered. "Please tell Evan I'll be attending tonight. Looking forward to it." She replied with a thumbs-up emoji. That was all. No warmth. No questions. But I wasn't coming empty-handed this time. That afternoon, I went to the salon. A real one, not the budget chain I usually visited. I let the stylist trim my hair into a clean, shoulder-length bob and asked for soft curls like the ones I used to wear when I was young. At the boutique next door, I bought a deep emerald wrap dress, classy, understated. It made my eyes look alive again. The salesgirl smiled when she handed me the bag. "You've got something planned." "Huh?" I smiled back. "Yes, I do." Marcus picked me up just before 6 high. He wore a navy blazer and carried a slim leather briefcase. "You sure you're ready?" he asked as we pulled into the long driveway, the mansion glowing gold behind the iron gates. I nodded. "This isn't revenge, Marcus. It's realignment." He chuckled. "Let's realign then." I walked through the grand front doors with my head high. The foyer was just as I remembered, cold marble, echoing with laughter from rooms I used to be welcomed in. The nanny opened the door again. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Marcus behind me. "We weren't expecting—" "Tell Evan his mother's here," I said gently. She stepped aside. I walked in. The dinner table was even grander this time. Crystal stemware, gold-rimmed plates, long white tapers burning bright. But again, my place was set at the end, slightly apart, with a folded paper napkin instead of linen. I paused. Then, I walked to my seat, took a breath, and sat. My son glanced at me briefly. "Glad you could make it, Mom," he said, more out of obligation than affection. His eyes flicked to Marcus. "Who's he?" "My attorney," I said plainly. There was a ripple of tension at the table. His wife furrowed her brow. Someone cleared their throat. "Your attorney?" he repeated, now with a short laugh. "For what?" Marcus stepped forward and placed the briefcase beside my plate. "For this." He slid a sealed envelope across the table, letting it land just beside my son's champagne flute. My son didn't open it. He just stared at it, then at me. "Mom, what's going on?" I leaned forward slightly. "You asked me to stay quiet last time. I did. I let someone else speak instead." He opened the envelope. Inside were copies of the deed reclamation filings, the account recovery forms, and a formal request to cease all asset manipulation in my name. His color changed, just a flicker, but enough. Marcus remained calm. "Everything inside has already been filed. You'll want to contact your counsel." "This is a joke, right?" His voice rose slightly. "Mom, come on, we're family." "Exactly," I said softly. "Which is why I let this go on far longer than I should have." His wife whispered something to him, glancing nervously at the other guests. The room had gone still. Forks paused mid-air. Conversations halted. Everyone was watching us. He looked at me then, truly looked for the first time in years. I saw panic behind his eyes, but also something else, recognition. He had underestimated me, and worse, he knew it. Marcus spoke again. If you wish to resolve this privately, Elaine is open to that. But the necessary legal protections are now in place. The property, the funds, the power of attorney, all restored. I added, and I'll be moving forward with my own financial advisor from now on. My son didn't speak for a long moment. Then he gave a short, forced laugh. Well, guess. I deserved that, huh? I didn't laugh. You deserved a mother who loved you, I said. You had that, still do. But love doesn't mean handing someone a rope and watching them pull the floor out from under you. Dinner resumed, awkward and quiet. I didn't stay for dessert. As I stood to leave, my granddaughter ran up to hug me. I bent down and whispered, "Visit me soon, okay?" She nodded. Her mother called her back sharply. I walked out of that mansion, without looking back. The cold air hit my face like a baptism. Marcus held the door open for me. "Well done," he said. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. For the first time in years, I didn't leave that house feeling smaller. I left with every piece of myself, and every right that was mine to reclaim. The call started the next morning. First, a simple text. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer. Then came a voicemail. "Mom, I think we got off on the wrong foot. Let's have lunch, just you and me." I deleted it. 2 days later, a courier delivered a bouquet to my porch, white lilies wrapped in expensive black paper, with a silver bow. The card said, "For the strongest woman I know." No signature. But I didn't need one. I left the flowers in the sink overnight. In the morning, they'd already begun to wilt. I had warned Marcus that my son would try to charm his way back in. He always had a way of masking guilt with gifts, but this time, I wasn't playing his game. This time, I had proof, protection, and peace on my side. The legal paperwork moved swiftly. The land deed transfer was reversed within the week. The funds, siphoned from my retirement accounts, were traced and flagged, requiring immediate restitution or formal litigation. Marcus called it a quiet grenade. "You pulled the pin," he said, "and now we just wait." I didn't tell many people, but word got around, as it always does in families like ours, wealthy enough to draw attention, fractured enough to leak. A former investor of my son's. Company called to ask about a few things. An aunt from Florida emailed me asking if it was true I still owned the land beneath the mansion. I never responded. Let them wonder. Let him explain. A week later, I was at the farmer's market picking up fresh peaches when I saw his wife across the parking lot. She was standing next to her luxury SUV, sunglasses on, talking to someone on the phone with wild gestures. She saw me, froze, then looked away as if I were a stranger. I walked past without a word. There was nothing left to say. The next family dinner was canceled. No explanation. No reschedule. I imagined the tension in their kitchen, the panicked calls to lawyers, the whispered blame. I pictured my son asking his wife, "How could she do this?" And her replying, "How could you let her?" Then one evening, my son showed up at my door, alone. No flowers this time, no briefcase, just him, in a gray sweater that made him look like the boy I used to know. "Can I come in?" he asked. Stepped aside. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I used to cut the crusts off his sandwiches. "I didn't know it would get this far," he said. "I just thought I was helping, managing things." I let him talk. He stumbled through half apologies, defensive statements, and long pauses. Then he asked, "Why didn't you just tell me you were upset?" I met his eyes, Because every time I spoke, you made it clear you weren't listening." He looked away, bit his lip. "So what now?" "That depends," I said. "Do you want your mother back, or just your control?" He didn't answer, at least not with words. Instead, he reached into his jacket and handed me an envelope. Inside was a formal letter stating he'd relinquished any financial oversight of my accounts and assets. He slid it across the table like a peace offering. I nodded but didn't thank him. It was the bare minimum. Before he left, he said, "I didn't mean to hurt you. I stayed quiet, because whether he meant to or not, he did." Later that week, Marcus called. "Everything's settled. Official. You're back in full control." "Good," I said. "Do you want to pursue damages?" I thought about it. "No," I said. "Let him sit with what he's lost. That's enough." That Friday, I got a letter in the mail from my granddaughter. Handwritten, folded neatly, the way I taught her. It said, "Grandma, I miss you. Mom and Dad are really mad all the time now. But I remember your pie and your stories and your hugs. I hope I can visit you soon." "Love, Lily," I cried when I read it. Not out of sadness, but something else. Something like hope. He thought unraveling meant falling apart. But for me, it meant coming undone from everything that had ever held me down. I didn't hear from my son again for nearly a month. Not a call, not a text, not even one of those sterile forwarded emails about family plans or upcoming birthdays. And to be honest, I didn't miss the silence. I filled my days with long walks, organizing my garden, and something I hadn't done in years, volunteering. Every Thursday, I sat at the county legal clinic, helping older women review their wills, power of attorney documents, and pension accounts. It was there I met Linda, late 60s, sweet smile, recently widowed. Her stepdaughter had quietly drained her savings. "Everyone told me to let it go," she said with watery eyes. "But why does protecting myself feel like betrayal?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "Because they trained us to believe silence was love. But now we know, real love has boundaries." Meanwhile, Marcus kept me updated. "The press hasn't picked anything up," he said. "But I'd say your son's team is scrambling. They've filed 3 separate amendments to his business. Trust in the last 2 weeks. There's panic in the air." Good. Let there be panic. Let there be pause. Because the truth wasn't just paperwork. It had a ripple effect. The mansion? Still in his name, but the land it sat on, fully mine again. And he couldn't refinance, sell, or transfer without my signature. "Don't underestimate that leverage," Marcus said. "You own the roots under his castle." Then, one Sunday morning, I opened my front door to find a small box. No label, just a sticky note. Foreclosure. Inside was an old cassette tape. I didn't recognize it at first, but when I looked closer at the label, my breath caught. Thanksgiving, 1998. I hadn't heard that one in years. I dug out the old player again, blew off the dust, and pressed play. The sound crackled for a moment. Then came a boy's voice, "Young Evan, okay, Mommy, you sit there and don't move. I made this for you." I heard a piano, plinking notes, uneven rhythm. "I wrote this song for my mom 'cause she's magic." I closed my eyes. Let the music, the memory, wash over me like light through lace curtains. For a moment, I felt it again, that fierce, innocent love, that boy who believed I could move mountains. And then the moment passed. I stopped the tape and tucked it back into the box. The very next week, he came to see me again. This time, not at the front door. He walked around to the backyard, where I was pulling weeds by the roses. He didn't say anything right away, just stood by the fence with his hands in his pockets. I didn't invite him in. I waited. "I'm stepping down from the board," he finally said. "The investors think I need a break." I wiped my hands on a towel. Probably not a bad idea. They're saying I mishandled things, not just with you, with a lot of people. I nodded. Consequences have a way of doing that. He looked at me then, and there was something new in his face. Not arrogance, not defense, just weariness. You were right, he said, about all of it. I didn't need an apology. I'd stopped, hoping for one. But still, hearing those words made the ache in my chest loosen. I don't want to lose you, he added. You already did, I said gently. Now the question is, can you find your way back? He sat on the bench under the maple tree, and we talked for over an hour. Not about money, not about lawyers, but about the years in between, where we both got lost. He asked about Dad, about the old house, about why I never remarried, and when he got quiet, I knew it was time. I pulled the envelope from my apron pocket, the one Marcus had prepared, just in case. This is a revised agreement, I said. It gives me lifetime rights to the property. You keep your house, I keep my land. Mutual respect, no more manipulation. He took it without argument. I'll sign it, he said. I nodded. Then maybe we can start again. Not as the mother you control, but as the woman you owe the truth to. He looked down. I don't know how to fix everything. You don't need to, I said. You just need to stop breaking what's left. Later that evening, I made tea. The house was quiet, soft. I pulled out the tape again, but I didn't play it. Not this time. Instead, I tucked it into a drawer alongside the property deeds, the legal papers, and one faded photograph of my husband holding baby Evan in his arms. He came searching for redemption, but what I gave him was something quieter, more dangerous. A mirror. And this time I didn't flinch when he looked into it. It's been 6 months since that last conversation in the garden. The house at the top of the hill still stands, white stone, wide windows, trimmed hedges. But I don't visit, not because I'm angry anymore, but because I've learned the power of staying where I'm respected, not just where I'm related. He still sends messages sometimes, short, cautious updates. Lily got into advanced reading. Thinking of you this morning, I reply when I want to, sometimes with a heart, sometimes not at all. It's not revenge. It's restoration. The biggest change, though, is where I live now, not in that small bungalow near the highway anymore. I sold it, used the reclaimed funds and a modest settlement from my son's legal team to buy something just for me, a little seaside home, white shutters, climbing roses around the porch, a view of the water that catches gold every morning like it was made just for people who've survived enough to finally enjoy it. The first time I stepped inside, I placed my hands on the warm wood of the kitchen counter and whispered, mine. Not borrowed, not co-signed, not controlled. Mine. I see Lily often. She visits every other weekend. We bake. We take long walks. She asks questions, not about what happened, but about what matters. What was my dad like when he was my age? Do you think people change? One day, as we sat watching the waves roll in, she turned to me and asked, Grandma, do you still love him? I didn't answer right away. Instead, I said, love doesn't vanish, but it does change shape. Sometimes it becomes distance. Sometimes it becomes silence. And sometimes it becomes a door you don't open unless they knock with the right hands. She nodded like she understood more than most adults ever could. My days are peaceful now. Rise early, water my plants. Write in a journal I keep by the window. I volunteer still, mostly helping other older women understand the fine print of what they were never taught to question. One of them, a widow named Darlene, once said through tears, I thought I was being generous. Turns out, I was being erased. I touched her hand. Then let's write you back into the story. As for my son, he's quieter now, stepped away from public life for a while. Last I heard, he was working with a financial ethics nonprofit, some effort to redeem the path he'd walked. Maybe it's for PR, Or maybe, just maybe, it's real. I don't need to know. My peace doesn't depend on his progress anymore. A few. Weeks ago, he came by the seaside house for the first time. He didn't bring papers or lawyers. Just a small tin of chamomile tea and a hand-drawn card from Lily. He sat on the porch, eyes scanning the horizon. "It's beautiful here," he said. "It is," I replied. Then came the silence. Not the old kind, the sharp, dismissive kind. This one was softer. "Honest, I want to earn my way back," he said. I nodded. "Then keep knocking, but don't expect the door to always be open." He looked down. "Fair. We didn't say goodbye." He just placed the tea on the table and left. The tide rolled in behind him. Calm, patient, unbothered. What would you have done in my shoes? Stayed silent, or stood up quietly? Tell me in the comments. I didn't set out to punish my son. I set out to remember myself. And in doing so, I taught him the most powerful lesson of all, what dignity looks like when it finally stands up and walks out the door. Sometimes I sit on the back porch with a cup of tea, the waves folding quietly over each other like soft pages being turned by the ocean's hand. I think about the version of myself that once waited by the phone. The woman who would arrive early to dinners where no one made space for her. The mother who brought pies no one touched and wore scarves. No one complimented, all while telling herself, "This is enough. I am enough." She was brave. She loved deeply. But she was also afraid. Afraid that speaking up would cost her something precious. Afraid that saying no would make her unlovable. Afraid that boundaries would be mistaken for betrayal. And for years, I let that fear keep me small. But now I know something else. Speaking the truth may cost you comfort. It may shake the ground under relationships you thought were unshakable. It may even make people look at you differently. But silence, when it is rooted in shame, obligation, or fear, will cost you far more. It will cost you your reflection, your rest, your right to exist in full color, and when you give someone everything, only to be handed back silence and scraps. You don't yell. You don't beg. You don't break. You rise. I don't think my son meant to hurt me the way he did. But intention is not immunity. You can't love someone and still make them feel invisible. You can't call someone mom only when it's convenient. Family doesn't give you the right to rewrite someone's life behind their back. Respect is not a gift you give when it fits the mood. It's the floor beneath any relationship that's meant to last. If you are someone who's been overlooked, talked over, or politely pushed aside, let me say this clearly: you do not have to stay where you are not honored. You are allowed to take up space. You are allowed to draw a line, then stand on the side of it where your dignity is safe. These days, I wake up with sunlight on my pillow and silence that feels like peace, not punishment. The birds sing. The kettle whistles. And there is no one here to hand me a plastic plate, just a woman in her own home, on her own land, living a life no one thought she had the courage to claim. Sometimes Lily calls just to tell me what book she's reading. Sometimes my son sends me photos of her holding the pie dish I gave him years ago. He still knocks. Gently. Less often. But when he does, I choose whether to open the door. That's not cruelty. That's clarity. Before, I used to think motherhood meant giving until there was nothing left. Now I know. Real motherhood is teaching your child how to respect what they did not build with their own hands, even if what you're protecting is you. I didn't destroy my son. I just reminded him that I built him, and in doing so, I rebuilt myself.